Welcome to Slacker Sports Show.
Good evening, sports fans, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Slacker Sports Show, where we discuss anything and everything you want to know about sports. Let's welcome in the co-host of the podcast, Mark. How are you, Mark?
Doing well. NFL's kind of nearing the end of the regular season, so we're going to look at that this week. And basketball will be up and going here towards the end of the month, I believe. So we'll hit on that a little bit more as it gets into January, but right in the meat of the end of the football season right now.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to basically talk about this whole episode is the NFL and kind of how everything's going. We're about 3/4 of the way through the NFL season. I don't think there's anybody that has any buys left, so we're kind of already past that. And so we're just going to kind of recap what's going on and looking forward to what we might see in the playoffs, some other potential things. So Thursday night game tonight is New England versus Rams. When this goes up, the game will already be over. So a few things might change there. But let's start off, and I'm going to ask you, Mark, what do you feel like the league has done with COVID, and do you feel like they've handled it appropriately?
I mean, I think they've kind of kept, I don't know if I'd call them disruptions, but they've kept the distractions and kind of big news stories to a minimum. I mean, I don't agree with everything they've done, but you haven't heard too much since about the probably 4th or 5th week of the season. There's always something every week, but it just seems like the panic's not there as much as it used to be. I guess the big thing that they've done is they've kind of kept things going and haven't postponed things, which, depending on which way you look at it, could be good or bad. I mean, good because you'll get the season ending on time and you'll kind of avoid pushing the season into March or April, but bad if you're a team like, say, the Broncos, where their entire quarterback room basically got sick and had to have that practice squad guy come up. You may have wanted to push the game back a week then. So, I mean, I think they've done okay. They've, like I said, they've kept the big news stories to a minimum, so I think that's the biggest thing for them, and they're kind of just trucking along. What do you think?
I think they've done a lot of good things, kind of like what you said. They've done some things that are kind of questionable, but for the most part, I feel like they've handled it appropriately, and several sports, and I don't know if they're all using the same company or what's going on, but they have the little trackers now in their jerseys, and they wear these trackers, and they can kind of tell, if they end up having it, who's been exposed, who's been close distance, stuff like that. So they've done a lot of cool things with it, and I feel like that's kind of, as you said, put everyone's mind kind of at ease with that. And just because they play and they don't have COVID the day they play doesn't mean they don't actually have it. They just haven't had it long enough to be able to test appropriately. And so, but I feel like even when that happens, I wouldn't say it's not a huge deal. I mean, COVID's still a big issue, but it hasn't really knocked out like huge groups of people. Like you've seen a couple with like the Ravens and stuff like that where a bunch of people have gotten it, but it hasn't like wiped out an entire team, which is good to see. And it seems like the teams are taking the appropriate cautions. I know a couple weeks ago a couple teams got fined for not following the policies correctly, and so I feel like the NFL has handled it pretty well so far. So I guess the next thing to talk about is our major surprises of the season, and then we'll talk about our major disappointments. So, Mark, tell me who do you think has been a surprise to you so far this season?
Yeah, about this point, we're about 3/4 of the way through the season. Like Trevor said, we got about 4 weeks left. And I guess the 3 teams that stuck out to me when I was looking at the standings today and kind of just as I look week to week to see their results are the Steelers. I think I've talked about them on several other podcasts. I don't think they're necessarily the quality of team as like the Chiefs or maybe some of the other top echelon teams in the league, but you can't really dismiss their 11-1 record. I mean, the teams they've played aren't necessarily the best. I think ESPN, this playoff kind of standing format that they have strength of schedule, and Kansas City's schedule is a little bit tougher than Pittsburgh, and I think Tennessee has one of the harder schedules. So, but they're beating who they're supposed to be beating. They're kind of trucking along, and finally picked up their one loss this week against the Washington football team. But they surprised me, even though I don't think they're as high quality as the Chiefs. The Dolphins are definitely a surprise. I expected them to be a little bit better. I mean, I like what they're doing. Their coach, Brian Flores, has a lot of respect for people around the league, and I guess the biggest thing is just Tua coming in. I think we'll talk about him more later, but he seemed to kind of light a fire underneath the team, and I don't know if it's him or just kind of a new change, kind of change the attitudes, but they're 8-4 and pushing the Buffalo Bills, who I expected to be good, but they're pushing the Bills in that division, which is definitely a surprise. I thought the Bills would run away with the AFC East this year. And then the Browns, I would say, are surprising to an extent. I expected them to be good, but I didn't know if I expected them to be 9-3 and second in their division. We both thought that division would be really good with the Steelers and the Ravens, and the Browns we expected probably somewhere around the middle of the road for them, but they're 9-3. They've guaranteed their first winning season in a long time, and definitely could be a wild card team. I mean, we're going to talk about the playoffs towards the end of this episode, and right now they're about the 5th seed, but they're definitely living up to all the potential that everybody thought they could have, and you're seeing all the standout players they've picked up in all these drafts doing really well. Who are your surprise teams this year?
Yeah, I think Browns are for sure one of them. Kind of like what you talked about. I actually thought the Browns would be at like the 7-5 record that the Ravens are at, and that the Ravens would be like that 9-3 team. But yeah, the Browns have done what they needed to. They kind of had a skid there, kind of midway through, but they've seemed to fix that. I think a lot of that had to do with having Chubb out, and now that they got him back, they just get that much more powerful. And so they've been playing very, very good lately. The Patriots being 6-6 is kind of a surprise to me, because I honestly thought they'd be worse than this, and they're they're a 6-6 team. They might actually be able to make the playoffs. And so, I mean, I honestly thought, finally the Patriots aren't going to be good, and here they are at 6-6. And I guess I just thought they would be a lot lower at this point in the season. The Bills being back to 9-3. I mean, you've been on the Bills bandwagon all year long, but I was kind of skeptical, and then they were playing well, and I was like, oh, maybe they are good. And then they dropped a couple, and I was like, oh, maybe they're, what I thought they were. And nope, they're back up to 9-3. So the Bills kind of going through a skid, which every team does throughout the year. It just kind of matters about how long your skid goes. If your skid's 1 or 2 games, or if it's 5 or 6, that kind of makes and breaks your season. But the Bills back up to 9-3, and then the Dolphins as well. Last year, I mean, I don't even know what their record was last year, but they went under 4 games or something. They did terrible last year, and so I kind of expected that this season. I didn't think who they went out and got would have been that big of deal. I mean, especially since Tua wasn't starting. It's one thing to go out and draft a top 5 quarterback and they start right away, and maybe, like Joe Burrow, where he starts right away basically, and it's, is he good, is he not? Tua never really got that chance to start off the season, so I didn't expect the Dolphins to be that good. And now Fitzpatrick kept them in good enough, and now Tua has come in and kind of just even taken over even more. And yeah, the Dolphins being 8-4 is definitely something I did not see coming this year. So if you had to pick some disappointments in the season, what do you got, Mark?
Yeah, I have 4 either groups or teams that I picked out, and these are in no particular order. I kind of just went through the standings, and it's what stood out to me. The AFC South is just not as good top to bottom as I thought, and I'm not saying the division's bad. I mean, you got Tennessee and Indianapolis are both 8-4. I guess I just expected Houston to do more, so they're kind of tainting the division for me. And then I expected whoever was going to win this division to have a better record. I expected maybe like a 10-2 team, or somebody to be more of a standout, I guess, in the division. So that's a little disappointing. And like I said, not saying that the teams are bad. I just don't think anybody's going to make any noise coming out of the AFC South in the playoffs. They might upset somebody here and there, but I don't think any of those teams are going to make a run. The Ravens, we've talked about a little bit already, but they're only at 7-5. They've been hampered by COVID some, but there's also been just issues with play calling and teams kind of knowing what they're doing, so they don't have that surprise factor like they did last year. And right now they're sitting at 3rd in their division behind Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and I think, let me look a little bit, but I don't think they're going to be in the playoff picture as of now. I mean, they could obviously push somebody out, but For a team that we thought would probably go like 13-3 or 14-2, be one of the best teams in the league, it's kind of a disappointment. NFC East, I won't spend a lot of time on that. Not really any explanation needed. You're going to have a winner of that division probably be under 500. And, I mean, we didn't expect the Giants or the Washington football team to be good, which is kind of funny since they're both leading the division now. But I expected the Cowboys to be good, which, again, there's injuries there, so you can't blame everything on them. And then I expected the Eagles to be a lot better, which they just seem like a mess right now. So, whole NFC East isn't doing great. And then the Vikings, they're starting to turn it around. They're, I think, 6-6 right now. But I expected them to be one of the probably 3 or 4 best teams in the NFC. So they're a disappointment for me this year. And there's bright spots. I mean, they're starting to play better. They started the season off rough. But Justin Jefferson is being a standout for them. That's looking like a really good draft pick and a really good replacement for Stephon Diggs. Adam Thielen's doing Adam Thielen things, but they just kind of got off to a slow start, and it really tanked their record there for a little bit. Who are your disappointments?
For sure, the Ravens. I mean, we kind of had, at least I did. I've had the Ravens and the Chiefs kind of going at it in the AFC, and that's just not really been the case. The Chiefs beat them early on in the season, and I thought, whoa, the Chiefs are just that good, but then the Ravens just haven't seemed to figure it out. And even looking at Lamar Jackson's stats, it's not hard to realize why they're not winning, and it's because I think he's still a run first, pass second quarterback, where it's not like he literally thinks, I have to run first if I can't pass, but I don't know if his receivers aren't good enough or if the play calls aren't good enough, but anyway, he's not getting enough passes in a game to make him a lethal enough quarterback. Whereas last year, I feel like he kind of surprised people by his speed. Well, now people have defenses schemed for his speed, and they make him throw, which right now it's not working for him. So I don't know if it's like a Lamar Jackson thing or if it's the wide receivers, but something is not right there. And so the Ravens have really, really fallen off of kind of like a Super Bowl hunt team. Like, I don't think really anybody's scared of the Ravens right now. The Texans, probably my second one. And I mean, there's a lot has gone on in that organization this year, but the Texans Watson has played really good this year. If you look at his stats, he's played really well. The wide receivers have done their thing. The running backs have had injuries left and right. The defense isn't as good as it once was, but 4-8 record is not what I expected from the Texans. And the same thing with the Falcons as well at 4-8. Falcons with their offense and how good it's supposed to be, it just hasn't done it. And early on it was their defense kind of that was the problem. Like, their defense was giving up all these leads and everything. But like looking at their like points for like how many they've scored, and they've only scored 311 points this year, which is it's not. I mean, the Minnesota Vikings have scored 319, so it's not like they're a top. It's not like their offense is scoring all these points and their defense isn't. Their offense is struggling, and so again, another kind of disappointment this year with those two teams going 4-8. And there's other ones that if at the beginning of the season, I would say like Dallas Cowboys, like, wow, but as of right now, I'm just still surprised that the Texans are 4-8 and the Falcons are 4-8 as well.
Well, next we're going to kind of break down the divisions, and we're not going to go team by team. That could take forever. We'll just kind of summarize things in each division, but we'll give you the standings as we go through. First one will be the AFC East. Like we said, Buffalo Bills are leading that right now at 9-3. Miami's not far behind at 8-4. The Patriots are 6-6, and the Jets are currently winning the sweepstakes for Trevor Lawrence, 0-12, already eliminated from playoff contention and trying to tank for that number one pick. What are your thoughts on the AFC East? Like we said, are there any surprises or just what stands out to you about this division so far this season?
Well, I think the Dolphins obviously surprising. The Patriots surprising that they've continued to win this many. The Jets really no surprise. They had a chance to win last week, and then depending on how you watched it and who you talked to, whether or not they tanked that game or not. But the Bills looking strong out of this division, and I kind of expect them to make it in this division and win it. It's gonna be interesting to see if Miami can hold on to a playoff spot and two teams get out of the AFC East. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, like you said, Buffalo Bills, I expected them to be good this year, so I'm not too surprised. I mean, there's been times where there's been things to doubt about them, but they're 9-3, which is, I think, about right where we thought they're both going to be. Miami, surprising. And I think they'll be probably one of those wild card teams. We'll talk about it later, but there's 7 teams on each side in the playoffs this year, so there's an extra wild card spot. So I could definitely see them making it and maybe upsetting somebody. New England's about where I thought they were going to be. Maybe they haven't looked as good as I thought they would be, but I figured they'd be around 500. So, and the Jets really don't need to spend a ton of time on them. So we'll move on to the AFC North, probably one of the better divisions in football. Steelers are 11-1, Cleveland 9-3, Baltimore 7-5, and then the Bengals 2-9-1, and they are already eliminated from playoff contention just by their record. What do you think about the AFC North this year?
Not a lot of craziness at the bottom. I think we all had Cincy last in the division. I felt like they've really been bad since, the injury to Burrow, and I feel like he's going to completely change that team around, and I hope he does. I hope he gets back healthy, and I really do think that team's going to be good in a couple of years, because Burrow is definitely a MVP type of quarterback in the NFL. So hopefully we get to see him come back. The Ravens disappointed in them, thought they would be better, and the Browns seem to find ways to win, which is exactly what you have to do. They're not like these great, crazy, good-looking wins. I mean, if you even look at their point differential, their defense has given up 15 more points than their offense has scored. So they found ways to win with a 9-3 record. Pittsburgh at 11-1, as you said, it's impressive. Their schedule isn't very good, so 11-1 isn't as great. Plus, the games that I've watched them, they've really kind of struggled to play the whole time. And so I watched the game that they played against Dallas, and Dallas almost beat them, and that was with Dallas's backup quarterback. So I don't know. The 11-1 record is impressive. They're winning. I just don't know if I could see the Steelers being currently the best team in the NFL. What do you think about this division, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to me, I think the Browns going into the playoffs could be the scariest team in this division. I think Pittsburgh's kind of a mediocre 11-1 team, and like you said, they haven't really been dominant. So I could see the Browns making more noise in the playoffs. Ravens, we talked about, kind of a disappointment, but they're still at 7-5, so they could sneak in and make some noise in the playoffs. But they just haven't seemed like they've been on the same page or really been able to put their foot on the gas all year. So I don't know what to expect from them going forward. And then, like you said, the Bengals were frisky in a lot of games this year. They kept games close, and Joe Burrow's the real deal. I wasn't sure exactly what he's going to be. I thought he'd either be really good or really bad, and so far this year he's been really good before he got hurt. So, like you said, if I look up in a couple years and see that the Bengals are good, I wouldn't be surprised. They just have a lot of good teams in their division to go up against to kind of claw their way to the top. So we'll see how things play out in that division the rest of this year and then going forward and how the Bengals can do. But we'll move on to the AFC South. Titans and the Colts are tied for the lead in the division at 8-4. Houston Texans, we talked about them being slightly disappointing at 4-8. And the Jaguars are 1-11. They're in that sweepstakes for one of the top picks as well. And they are officially eliminated from playoff contention. What are your thoughts on the AFC South?
I mean, obviously, I think it's two teams in this one, the Colts and the Titans, trying to play for that one, I guess, division win and possibly a wild card. If I had to pick a team, I really don't know. They've played each other twice this year. They've each have won one of those games. And so the Colts winning the last time they played the Titans 45-26, but they lost the first time. They lost against the Titans 45-26, and then a couple of weeks before that they beat the Titans 34-17. So they're kind of flip-flop games. So I mean, they're both really good teams. They're getting the job done, but as far as like a playoff type of caliber team, I don't know but I guess the Titans went in last year and they didn't look like they kind of squeaked into the playoffs, and then they put up a really good performance. So I guess it's not over until it's over, but both teams looking pretty good. The bottom two, not really anything really to talk about there. I mean, neither of them really going to do anything in the next couple of weeks anyways. But what do you think about the AFC South?
I'd say the Colts are probably the team for me as far as who I'd be scared to play if I were a fan of an opposing team. I'm a Chiefs fan, and if I saw the Colts, I think I might be more scared than the Titans, but the Titans do have that playoff experience, and we saw what they could do against the Chiefs last year, so not going to completely doubt them, but the Colts, to me, just seem like the more consistent team. I mean, Tennessee started out 5-0, which means they've gone 3-4 in the last 7. Colts have just been more kind of steady all year, so I could see them maybe having more composure in the playoffs and kind of keeping things going there. Houston, like you said, disappointing, and hopefully they can maybe turn it around next year and figure out some things. And Jaguars, no need to really say too much about them. I don't think anybody expected them to be good, and they're probably even worse than I figured they'd be. So not much to look forward to for them, at least for the end of this year. Moving on to the AFC West, our favorite team, Kansas City Chiefs, are 11-1 and are the first team on the AFC to clinch a playoff berth. The Raiders are 7-5, Broncos are 4-8, and the Los Angeles Chargers are 3-9 and officially have been eliminated from playoff contention. What are your thoughts on this division? I mean, this is kind of close to our hearts for both of us, just because our favorite teams in this division. But what have you seen out of the AFC West?
I think we saw what I guess we thought we were going to see. The Chiefs running away with it. No really contention teams in here to beat them. The Raiders put up 2 games that were, Kansas City's probably toughest 2 games they've played, which is weird because then the Raiders lose to really bad teams, and I'm just like, I don't understand. Broncos, 4-8, I guess, around kind of what I thought. I thought they'd be maybe a little closer to the 500 mark. The Chargers, even though they're 3-9, I was kind of been impressed with their quarterback. The Chiefs ended up having to play him. What was it, week 2? Yeah, week 2 against the Chargers, and that was a close game for the Chiefs. But Herbert came in and kind of just proved that he could play NFL quarterback. And so, even though they're 3-9, if I was a Chargers fan, I would not be upset with the season. And you're finding your quarterback. And that's what they've kind of done. They Rivers is left, and it's time to find another quarterback, and the Chargers have done that. So I think the Chargers will be up again next year. I don't really see the Broncos. So far I can't see anything good happening there. And then the Las Vegas Raiders kind of getting scrappy wins once against the Chiefs. But so as far as this division goes, it's pretty much just the Chiefs kind of manhandling everyone. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, it's kind of played out the way we figured. Chiefs, no surprise, but I guess there's been times they haven't looked as dominant as I'd like as a Chiefs fan, and that's something we could probably spend a whole podcast on, but they are 11-1, running away with the division like we thought. Raiders are a little bit surprising to me. I figured they'd be the second best team in the division, but like you said, they've been scrappy. They've been in a couple of games, and I think the Raiders have some things to look forward to going forward. Even if they don't make the playoffs this year, I think there's positives you can take from this season going into their next season in Las Vegas. And Broncos, I didn't expect a lot out of them. They're actually in a better spot than I thought they'd be. I figured they'd be dead last, and the Chargers have just gone through a lot of weird things this year, so that's probably why they're at the bottom. But a lot of national analysts seem like they try to pick the Broncos and the Chargers as kind of teams that might surprise them to start the year, and I never get that. Chargers I can kind of see, I guess, because they do have talent, but they always just get hit with injuries. But the Broncos, they have Drew Lock, who some people are high on, some people aren't. I just don't see a lot of ways forward to move up the rankings, I guess, for them. So I just don't see a lot of positives for them looking forward. And we'll kind of move on from the AFC. We'll move on to the NFC. Everybody's favorite division, the NFC East. Nobody really standing out here, like we talked about. If you've paid attention at all this year, you've heard about how bad the NFC East is. Currently, the standings are the Giants at 5-7, the Washington football team's at 5-7 as well. The Eagles are at 3-8-1, and then the Cowboys are at 3-9. What do you think when you look at the NFC East this year?
Well, I think it's everyone's favorite division if you're in the division because you still have a chance to win it with a losing record. So, I mean, I don't know. They kind of just been beating up on each other, and they're going to get wins from each other. But as far as like playing, I guess, any other division, I mean, this division is just clearly not as good as any other division in the NFL. It's funny because usually there's like a division that really sticks out, but it's not that way this year. This division clearly sticks out for being like the worst division. So I don't know. There's not a lot to say good about this division. It's hard to talk about it, but pretty much anybody still has a chance to win this. Anybody can get that place in the playoffs, and it looks like it possibly could be a losing team under a 500 record, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought about putting the Giants in my surprise teams, even though we're at 5-7. That's kind of what scared me away. But when you have your best player go out at the beginning of the year and then start out horribly, you usually don't think you'll have a chance at the playoffs. But the Giants are currently the division leader in the NFC East, so that's surprising to me. But Washington, they're about what I expected them to be. I expect them to make some strides this year and kind of do a little bit better. They have some talent on the defense, which is something to look forward to for them. And they're another team that if I looked up in a couple of years and saw that Washington was good, wouldn't be surprised. I think they still need to figure out things at quarterback. I mean, Alex Smith's playing okay, but Dwayne Haskins didn't do much early on in the season. Eagles, big disappointment. And Dallas, you could say they're disappointing, but a lot of that's due to injuries and a lot of other factors. So they're the team we both had winning the division and kind of running away with it, and things that happened to them were kind of out of their control. So can't really blame them for that. But just a disappointing division overall, and I can't see the winner of this division making any noise in the playoffs. So don't spend too much more time on them as far as concerns if you're a fan of another team. We'll move on to the NFC North. Currently, the Packers are the division leader at 9-3. Minnesota Vikings are at 6-6. Chicago Bears got off to that hot start, but now they're at 5-7. And the Detroit Lions are at 5-7. Are things playing out in this division the way you thought they would, or any surprises, anything that caught you off guard so far throughout this year?
I would say the Packers. I think we both had the Packers kind of winning this division. Maybe the Vikings. We knew, well, at least I knew coming in that the Bears were only going to win if their defense could hold people. It's not going to be their offense that leads them there. And then the Bears start out to like a really, really good record, but they've kind of pooped the bed as of late. Haven't won much, so they're down at 5-7. And then the Lions, actually the Lions at 5-7's kind of, I thought the Lions would be like a 2 or 3 win team, and 5-7 is not bad for the Lions, but I think there's clearly, well, I can't say clearly because the Vikings are getting better, and I think the Vikings could in the playoffs make some difference because they're a good team. They just weren't playing well early on, and Dalvin Cook kind of got them going, and now they've kind of gone back to what they've done before with wide receivers and running backs kind of having equal share. But I mean, they're not a bad team. I wouldn't write them off yet, but clearly the Packers are kind of running away with this division at 9-3, and I think they'll keep doing that. And I think the Packers are a team that could see a team like the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. What do you think, Mark?
I guess I'm not surprised by the Packers. They still got Aaron Rodgers, still got Aaron Jones, still got a lot of weapons. But Green Bay the past couple of years has always just felt to me like a team that's missing a player here and there. I couldn't tell you who the player is, but they're just missing one guy that could push them over the edge. So I could see them winning a game or two in the playoffs, but I don't know if I see them going to the Super Bowl or even the conference championship. Vikings, I already talked about them some. They're a disappointment, but they're a team that could scare somebody in the playoffs and take an upset in the early rounds, but they've just been so back and forth that I don't know if I could count on them to make a run. And then, yeah, we talked about the Bears. They got to that hot start, but they just don't have really much on offense to go on at all that could carry them. And like you said, the Lions have been scrappy, and they've looked better than I thought they were going to be. I think I agree with you. I thought they were probably going to be a 2 or 3 win team. So 5-7 is better than I thought. And if you sit and watch some of their highlights, they look really good. They just can't put a full game together. So they could be good maybe next year, but not much to write about this year. And we'll move on to our second to last division. We'll cover the NFC South. The Saints are at 10-2, and they are the first team in the NFC to clinch a playoff berth. The Buccaneers are at 7-5. The Falcons are at 4-8, and then Carolina Panthers are at 4-8 as well. What do you think when you look at the NFC South?
Well, this is a division that we thought was going to be closer. At least I did. Tampa Bay starting out, they look a little rough, and then it was like they hit their stride, and it was like, Tom Brady's going to lead this team to another, Super Bowl with a different team. And then they've kind of just cooled off again. I think I don't remember if it's a Thursday night or a Monday night game against the Giants where they about lost it. Kind of was like the tipping point, and they have not looked good since. I would say that the Saints, obviously they have the best record in the NFC, so they're a team that's looking like they could make it to a Super Bowl here. But early on I would have said the Buccaneers were right up there with them, but that's the thing with the playoffs is you only have to play good for 3 or 4 games and you can get to the Super Bowl. So they're not a team to write off yet, at least for me. If they keep losing, then maybe, but I think Tampa Bay will kind of make a debut in the playoffs, and a few teams that are better might end up losing. The Falcons and the Panthers kind of just, they're down there. Falcons I thought were going to be better. Panthers would have been better if McCaffrey could have stayed injury-free, but injury kind of ruined that whole thing. And so both those teams down there 4-8, so nothing crazy going forth for them. But I think in the future, I think Carolina has a lot of good things to lean on. I still think they got to find that number one quarterback for them, but it's going to be growing pains. But when they played the Chiefs, they played really, really well. Their offense played really well. Now they had Christian McCaffrey that game, but they played really well. And I kept telling the stream I was in that just because they had a losing record doesn't mean that that's the type of team they are. They're a good team. They just haven't been able to get those wins. What do you think about it, Mark?
Yeah, not surprised at the Saints. I expected them to be top of the division. Buccaneers look scary early on, and like you said, they could make some noise in the playoffs, but they're where I'd hope they would be. As a Tom Brady hater, I was hoping they wouldn't be great, so I'm okay with where they are. But you're right, where if they get into the playoffs, which I think currently they're about the 6th seed, they could definitely make some noise and upset some teams, so I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up making a run, but maybe just not as good a regular season as a lot of people thought they're going to have. Falcons, I think they need to have some sort of culture shift. It just seems like, did they fire their coach this year? I think they might have, or I heard there were either rumors or they did. It's been a long year for everybody, but I think they are talking about firing the coach or may have already fired their coach, but I think they just need a culture shift because it's just been a couple disappointing years in a row for a team who has the talent, especially at receiver, to be good, and it's just not reflecting in wins. And then I agree with you on Carolina. They're a team like Cincinnati, like Detroit, like the Chargers, who they're not going to have a good record, but they are scrappy. They could take a game from a team that is maybe underestimating them because they have some talent here and there. And like you said, Christian McCaffrey, if he had been here the whole season, they could have been maybe an 8-8 team pushing for the playoffs. I didn't expect them to win the division by any means, even with Christian McCaffrey, but they could have maybe been pushing for a wild card spot. And like you said, I think they have a lot of good things looking forward that they can kind of lean their hat on and build on.
to answer your question, yes, Dan Quinn did get fired, and since then, Raheem Morris, their head coach, has gotten 2 wins and 1 loss. So they just kind of, well, I wouldn't say recently did it, but yeah, there's been so much going on in the NFL this year, I can't even keep it straight anymore.
So that kind of answers that for me, and I don't know if Raheem Morris is the answer going forward, but they need to do something to change the culture in that, because it just kind of seems like a disappointing culture. I'm not saying you have bad players or anything, but just not living up to their potential. We'll finish up with our final division here, and then we'll kind of look at the playoff picture going forward. But look at the NFC West. We've talked about them a lot this year just because a lot of the teams got off to a hot start. There's a lot of talent in this division, but there's no real dominant team, I would say. And it's kind of been a roller coaster as far as who's the division leader, who we think could be good at that division. And the standings as of now are the Rams at 8-4, Seahawks at 8-4, the Arizona Cardinals at 6-6, and the San Francisco 49ers at 5-7. What are your thoughts on the NFC West?
I think coming into the season, we really thought this was going to be a division that had possibly 3 teams make it to the playoffs, and I'm kind of still on that bandwagon just because I feel like the Cardinals are better than their 6-6 record. Seattle had started off really, really good, and they're letting Russ cook, but it seems like defenses have kind of figured out that offense now, and so it's up to the Seahawks to figure out how to counteract those defenses now. But they're at 8-4, and then the Rams kind of, I wouldn't say surprising. We knew the Rams were good. A couple of years ago they were really good, and then last year they were not good, and so we kind of didn't know what we were going to get with the Rams this year. But it seems like we got the okay or better than normal Rams this year, so they're at 8-4 as well. So I mean, all those 3 teams in the middle, I would say it's kind of going to still be up because, I mean, what if the Rams lose 2, the Seahawks lose 2, Arizona wins 2, then we got a 3-way tie for first place. So I mean, there's still games left. I don't think the 49ers are going to make a push, mostly because they've just been absolutely riddled with injuries all year long. And the fact that they've even won 5 games is amazing to me, especially with who they've played. But the San Francisco 49ers don't think they're going to be in that playoff run. But this division's kind of turning out the way we thought. I think at the beginning of the season, I had the 49ers before all the injuries. But I did think that this division was going to have a bunch of really strong teams in it, and I think that's what we're getting with the NFC West. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the Rams kind of just take care of business, so it wouldn't surprise me if they won a game or 2 in the playoffs, but they're not as dominant as they were a couple of years ago. You kind of hit on that, but they just kind of handle business and win games they're supposed to win, so they're sitting at the top of the division there. Seahawks, I don't have a ton of faith in them. Like you said, Russell Wilson has kind of dipped off, and their defense really can't stop anybody. So I wouldn't expect too much out of them. The Cardinals, to me, are the team that, if they got in the playoffs, I think they could take probably a game from anybody in the NFC. They do have the talent. It's just, are they going to make it there? DeAndre Hopkins, I won't talk about him anymore, but he's doing what I thought he was going to do. Kyler Murray, most games he plays pretty well, and I think they could score an upset in the playoffs if they make it there, but there's questions about if they'll make it there at this point as it is. And then, yeah, like you said, as a 49ers, if you were a 49ers fan, I would say kind of wipe the season from your memory, try to get a good player in the draft. You're going to have a higher draft pick, and kind of just bank on next year being good. Hopefully everybody comes back and you see that 49ers team that we saw last year. But like you said, even with all these injuries, 5-7 is kind of impressive for, I think at one point they had like 10 starters injured or something like that from last year. So I wouldn't put too much stock in this year if you're a San Francisco fan. And to finish out the podcast, we'll look at the playoff picture as of now. I mean, there's things that could change. There's a Thursday night game today, and just there's moves that could happen in the last 4 weeks. But as of now, on the 10th, I think today's December 10th, the AFC playoff picture 1 through 7 looks like Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Buffalo, Tennessee, Cleveland, Miami, and Indianapolis. And playoffs are different this year. There are 7 teams on each side. Top 4 seeds are division winners. So that's where you get Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Buffalo, and Tennessee, and then bottom 3 are going to be wild card teams. And this year in the playoffs, only one team on each side has a bye. Typically, it's been 2, and the 3 through 6 seeds play. But this year, number 1 seed is the only one that has a bye, and then 2 through 7 play in that first week. So as of now, Pittsburgh would have the bye. Kansas City and Indianapolis would play. Buffalo and Miami would face off, and Tennessee and Cleveland would face off. And like I said, obviously those things can change, but that's the games we'd be looking at right now. And the teams that could be knocking on the door for some of those spots, as far as wild card, are Las Vegas, Baltimore, and New England. But what do you think of the playoff matchups? If they stayed the same, what are you thinking of those first-round matchups that we have right now?
I think a few would be good. I would really like to see the Tennessee-Cleveland matchup and the Buffalo-Miami. I just don't – and this will probably change. I think Kansas City will end up getting the bye in this division with the best record. I don't think Pittsburgh is going to continue to only have one loss. They got to play Cleveland the very last week of the season. So, but as far as like the top 7, I mean, they look good. The Raiders might be able to get in. Baltimore might be able to get in. I don't see New England possibly getting in there, but so I would say those last games are going to be between Miami, Indianapolis, Las Vegas, and Baltimore. But I like the AFC. I think the AFC is a little stronger as far as top end teams. I think maybe the NFC has deeper teams, but I think the AFC has the better top teams with Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Buffalo. I would even put Cleveland in there because I think Cleveland's better than Tennessee. But what do you think about the matchups, and what do you think about the playoff picture right now in the AFC?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Kansas City will probably make a push for that number 1 seed just to get a rest that first week. I think they realize how important that is. Having their playoff run last year, I think they could use a rest here and there. But if things stay the same, I would be a little scared of Indianapolis as a Chiefs fan. I think that Kansas City will still win, but Indianapolis is frisky, so that would scare me a little bit. I really like that Buffalo and Miami matchup. That's a game I would definitely want to watch. 2 teams in the same division who have been battling it out all year, and a surprise team in Miami that could make some noise in the playoffs. Me being on the Buffalo bandwagon, I would hope Buffalo would win, but I could see Miami putting up a good fight. And then I agree with you on Cleveland. I think that they could definitely beat Tennessee. Tennessee's kind of just been middle of the road this year. I think Cleveland has more talent top to bottom, so I could see Cleveland winning that one. And like I said, things could change, but as of now, those would kind of be my picks there. And I don't think New England will make their way in. Baltimore could, but they just haven't been dominant this year. So I guess the team that would scare me the most out of the first 3 out would be the Raiders. And then we'll move on to the NFC. And right now, before the Thursday night game, before the end of the season, the standings are as follows. New Orleans is number 1, Green Bay's number 2, the Rams are number 3, Giants are at number 4, and again, top 4 seeds are just division winners, so if it was going by record, Giants would be at the bottom. Seattle is the first wild card team, Tampa Bay is the second, and Minnesota is the third wild card team. First 3 teams out would be Arizona, Chicago, and Detroit. And then the first round matchups as of now would be Green Bay and Minnesota facing off, the 2-7 matchup. The Rams and Tampa Bay would be the 3-6 matchup, and then the Giants and Seattle would face off in the 4-5 matchup, with New Orleans having the bye as the number 1 seed. What do you think about those matchups, and what do you think the NFC playoff picture will ultimately end up looking like?
I think it's gonna pay off to not win your division but be good this year, because whoever that 5 seed is gonna get a very, very bad team to play against. So I would want to be that team. It's kind of like what I said before. The AFC, I feel like, has a better kind of upper teams, but now looking at the NFC, I mean, the Saints and Green Bay are going to be really good. But I feel like the NFC has just if it wasn't for the Giants, they would have a lot of deep teams because Arizona would be in there, Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Seattle, the Rams. I mean, they're all very, very good, strong teams. So the NFC, I guess, overall has a better side on it as far as teams. I feel like there's stronger teams out of the NFC. Green Bay, Minnesota matchup, I feel like that's always a good matchup, even though Green Bay's had the upper hand in that most of the time. The Rams and Tampa Bay would be a really good matchup as well. And then that 4-5 game, I just don't see that 4 seed doing much no matter who it is. So whoever has a 5th seed, you're going to, I would say have a bye, but it's going to feel more like a 2-7 matchup rather than like a 5-4 matchup where the teams are going to come in and kind of beat up on each other. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think there's going to be kind of a race for the 5th seed, which sounds weird, but just being able to face off against the Giants will be a big push to do that. So you could see Tampa roll off a few wins and try to get an easy round 1 game. Green Bay, Minnesota, like you said, is going to be good. Another division matchup in the playoffs. And Minnesota has the talent to match up with Green Bay, I believe, but they've just kind of been disappointing throughout the year. So that could be closer than people think. Rams and Tampa Bay would probably be the primetime matchup just because of 2 offenses with a chance to be explosive. And then, yeah, whoever is the 5 seed will have probably a cakewalk unless the Giants surprise me in the first round. And Arizona, I definitely could see moving in there and being a scary team. I could see them taking Seattle's spot at 5, 6, or 7, depending on how that plays out. If Arizona goes on a run there, I would be more scared of Arizona if I were facing off against them compared to Seattle. So that could be interesting to see how that division plays out and who gets that spot. Because I think it will be either Seattle or Arizona coming out of that division. There's not going to be a huge push by Chicago or Detroit for a playoff spot. So I totally agree. And like you said, I think the top 2 or 3 teams in the AFC, as far as talent, maybe not the seedings as of now, because we both talked about how Pittsburgh's maybe not as good as maybe some of the other teams in the AFC, but I think the top 2 or 3 teams, talent-wise in the AFC, could beat basically anybody in the NFC. Like you said, the NFC, all the teams are decent, but I think Kansas City, Buffalo, and probably Cleveland are good to great as far as talent and could beat a lot of those teams. So if I had to pick, like if you told me who's going to win the Super Bowl, the AFC or NFC, regardless of team, I would probably pick the AFC just because of the talent at the top. But there's definitely a lot of teams that could surprise you in the NFC, and could be one of those things where the 6 seed or 5 seed comes out of the NFC just because of everybody's kind of right in the middle as far as talent. So could be a surprise there as far as who comes out of the NFC.
I agree with that too. I feel like it's weird because usually you want to be the 1 seed out of there, but I mean, I don't feel like you have an advantage in the NFC, whether you're the 1 seed or the 2 seed. I feel like no matter what, you're going to get a tough matchup. Whereas I feel like the AFC is kind of a little different. Like not that Indianapolis couldn't beat Kansas City, but like I feel like Kansas City is clearly better than Indianapolis. I feel like Buffalo is clearly better than Miami, but you could see something happen there. In the NFC, I just feel like it's a hodgepodge, and we have no idea who's coming out of the NFC. If we're talking about the Super Bowl, we just have no idea. There could be plenty of teams there, whereas I feel like the AFC, there's maybe 2, possibly 3 teams that could make it to a Super Bowl in the AFC. But I agree with you. I feel like the AFC is talented-wise much better than the NFC guys.
You want to hit on fantasy anything, or kind of just wrap it up?
We could talk about fantasy, how you beat me. We could talk about that.
We've just been ending most of the podcast like that, so
yeah. If we want to talk about the fantasy like we kind of normally have been, we did play each other last week, and you won by quite a few points, I would say. Didn't play great. We had a problem at tight end. We just didn't have a tight end that we were able to use. Mark Andrews out on the IR, so we were kind of just using people. We picked up Hayden Hurst. He got me 1.9 points on 1 reception for 9 yards, so that's good to see. Yeah, he's quite amazing. Nick Chubb kind of did his thing. Dalvin Cook did his thing. Cooper Kupp did his thing. McLaurin had an off day for him. He's usually pretty good for me. He had 3.4 points against Pittsburgh. Michael Thomas did kind of his thing. Russell Wilson supposed to score me 32 points, only scored me 22. So, I mean, but we've kind of talked about how Russell Wilson lately has kind of been slowly falling down. We got Jarvis Landry on my bench, scored me 20 points. Chris Carson on my bench, scored me 20 points. The kicker Koo, which has been the MVP of the year so far. Last week he had me 25 points for a kicker. This week 14. Our defense has played well. I have Indianapolis scored me 12.5, but they're on the bench. And then Miami scored me 15 against Cincinnati. And both of those defenses have actually surprisingly been good all year long. And you wouldn't think that from Miami, but Miami's one of the top scoring defenses right now. So, you know, it was a good week. I think if we played a bunch of other teams in that league, we would have done better. I think I would have outscored all but 2 teams in the league. Yeah, I would have scored all but 2 teams, one of them being you, in the league that week. So, unfortunately, not able to pull it off. But yeah, your team tore it up. Talk a little bit about your good team, huh?
Yeah, I mean, just the past 2 weeks, I've had standout players, like probably the top 2 scorers the past 2 weeks as far as fantasy. I had Tyreek Hill. Was that 2 weeks ago when he went off for about 50 points? And then
last week.
Yeah, and then I had Darren Waller this week who went off for 45 points, which is 28 more than expected. So we were actually expected to be pretty close, I think, or basically tie. You were expected to win by about 0.18 points. So going in is supposed to be pretty even. It's just Darren Waller definitely stood out for me there. And, I mean, he's been not, I'm not going to say my MVP, but he's filled in pretty well for George Kittle, who I had early on, and is on my IR just in case that he came back towards the end of the year and could use him for the playoffs, which we're about to enter. But Rodgers did. I have Aaron Rodgers starting this week. He did about what he was expected to do. Could have put in Josh Allen. He would have got me 9 more points, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers did what he expected to do. Tyreek Hill, not going to say he had a drop off because he still scored about 15 points, but coming off that 50-point game, it was a little bit of a dip down, but he did basically what he was expected to do. Calvin Ridley had 15 points for me. Justin Jefferson has been a good pickup for me. He had 28 points, which is about 10 more than was expected, and he's been pretty consistent all year. And I still flip-flop back and forth between him and Adam Thielen because I have them both on my team, and it's kind of just whoever I think is going to be hot for the Vikings. And last week they played the Jaguars, so I could have picked either one and been fine. But that's something that I kind of flip-flop back and forth on week to week. Aaron Jones did what he's supposed to do. I think I finally found a good backup running back. I had Mike Davis from the Panthers, and he's filling in from Christian McCaffrey, but has kind of been back and forth. I picked up Wayne Gallman from the Giants. He got me 14 points last week, and I think he's on a team who's pushing for a playoff spot, so he could be somebody who gets me consistent points these last couple weeks. My kicker didn't get much. Lutz from New Orleans only got me 3 points. And then Minnesota's defense, again, going against Jacksonville, got me quite a few points. But I did just drop them because I'm kind of looking for a defense. We're moving into our fantasy playoffs the next, 3 weeks. And me and the first overall seed have a bye this week. And then the 4 and 5 seeds face off, which are you and Josh, I believe. And then the 3 and 6 seeds face off. And then us two that have the bye will face somebody next week. But kind of thankful for that just because fantasy playoffs are kind of hard to address because some teams start resting guys as you get closer to the playoffs, the actual playoffs, and you can't count on guys who have carried you the whole season to get you fantasy points the last 3 weeks because their teams are so good. So I'm trying to find people who are in teams that are fighting for a playoff spot, nothing secured yet, that could help me make a push. So I just dropped Minnesota's defense because I think they play a couple tough teams here, and actually picked up Dallas's defense. And you might say Dallas hasn't been good all year. The reason I picked them up is because they have kind of an easy schedule going forward.
Well, and to make a point of that, not all of the leagues are like this, but our league we set up to our Super Bowl week is week 16, which is not the last week of the season, because usually the last week of the season, your teams like your Chiefs and stuff, they kind of rest their players, and yeah, that would destroy you if you had Patrick Mahomes carrying you the whole way. You get to your Super Bowl game for your fantasy playoffs, and then he's just set. So, I mean, and it's kind of trickling into week 16 now, depending on how good the teams are, stuff like that. So the playoffs are definitely more difficult. It's a road to get here. And then we just have it set up so week 14, which is this week, is first round. Week 15 next week is second round. The week 16 is a Super Bowl kind of for our fantasy league. So kind of pay attention to that when you start your fantasy leagues. Not all leagues are that way. So, but if you're looking for a league, I would suggest having your Super Bowl or the very last game being week 16, because that's usually most teams are still playing their main players.
Yeah, so if you're looking at my roster kind of like that, I mean, you could see both my quarterbacks start to get rested here before too long. I got Aaron Rodgers and Josh Allen, so they could start getting rested here before too long. Tyreek Hill, definitely see the Chiefs resting him. Aaron Jones, another guy that could be rested. But a lot of my receivers are on teams that are fighting for a playoff spot, so that's good. Wayne Gallman on the Giants, again, they're fighting for a playoff spot in their division there. Darren Waller, not too worried about him. They're kind of in the thick of the wild card teams, so he might be a solid person to have for the next couple weeks. And like I said, I'm looking for a new defense. Picked up Dallas, and they're not in the playoffs or like angling for the playoffs, but they face some teams that aren't great in the last 3 weeks, which could give me enough points to push me over the edge. They face Cincinnati this week, San Francisco in week 15, and then Philadelphia in week 16. So got 3 teams there that aren't great, so the defense of Dallas could give me some points there, and had Minnesota's defense, but they're facing, I think, a little bit tougher schedule. So basically just trying to find somebody and get me points from that defense position. Okay, thank you everybody for listening to the podcast. I appreciate you guys listening, and know we took a couple weeks off, but it was around the holidays, and life just kind of got busy for both of us. So hopefully we get back to being regular, getting content to you guys. Got Christmas coming up, but still want to get you that sports news and kind of what we think about everything. We appreciate you guys as a listener, and we'd love for you to subscribe if you haven't already, wherever you listen to your podcast, whether that's Apple, Spotify, whatever platform you use. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We also have a YouTube channel where we have the audio playing from all of our podcasts. You can find that by searching Slacker Sports Show. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Slacker Sports.